It all starts with a question, a really powerful, really direct question asked back in 1972 by a brilliant New Guinean politician named Yali. This question gets right to the heart of why the modern world is so unequal. It's a massive puzzle, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack in this explainer.
All right, so let's dive right in. We are breaking down Jared Diamond's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Think of it as his epic attempt to finally answer Yali's question. So just picture it for a second. Jared Diamond, a biologist, is on a beach in New Guinea, and he's approached by Yali, the super charismatic local leader. Yali doesn't ask about short-term politics or money. No, he asks about the deepest patterns of history. He's looking at all the material wealth, the cargo, as he calls it, that Europeans have, and he just wants to know, why them? Why not us? And really, Yali's question is maybe the biggest question in all of human history. Ever since the last ice age, about 13,000 years ago, you see some groups developing metal tools, writing, and huge industries, while others didn't. And these differences have shaped literally everything about the world we live in today. The search for why that happened, well, that's what this is all about. Okay, before we go a single step further, we have to get one thing perfectly clear. Diamond's first and honestly most important point is that the answer to Yali's question has absolutely nothing to do with race. For a long, long time, the ugly go-to explanation for these global inequalities was based on these awful racist ideas, that some people were just innately smarter or better than others. Diamond's entire thesis just flips that completely on its head. He argues the answer isn't in our biology at all. It's in the raw materials of geography. It's about the land, not the people living on it. And just to really hammer this point home, Diamond makes this really provocative argument. He basically says, look, in a traditional society like New Guinea's, survival is a constant test of your intelligence. It's a dangerous environment. You have to be sharp to make it. So natural selection probably favored higher intelligence. Compare that to dense European societies, where frankly, you could survive and have kids no matter how smart you were. It means that old racist assumption might have it completely backwards. So, if it's not about the people, what is it about? Well, it all kicks off with a massive, totally unfair head start in one specific area, food production. And it all came down to pure geographic luck. This right here, this is the ultimate cause. This is the first domino to fall. Everything that comes later, all of it, goes back to which continents just happen to be perfectly set up for agriculture, and which ones, through no fault of their own, simply weren't.
Okay, just look at the raw numbers here. The imbalance is just staggering. If you want to build a big, powerful agricultural society, you absolutely need big domestic animals. For meat, for milk, for fertilizer, for plowing, for everything. So Eurasia starts out with 72 potential candidates and manages to successfully domesticate 13 of them. Now check out Sub-Saharan Africa, 51 candidates, and they domesticate 0. The Americas, just 1, the llama. This one fact alone is a complete game changer.
But wait, why were so few animals domesticated in the first place? Diamond has this great name for it, the Anna Karenina principle. It's from Tolstoy's famous novel, where the first line is, "All happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." Well, for an animal to be domesticated, it has to be happy in every way. It needs a whole bunch of specific traits. If it has even one single fatal flaw, domestication is off the table. And you can see these deal breakers all over the animal kingdom. Take zebras, for example. You might think, why not zebras? Well, they have a really nasty disposition. They're just too dangerous. Gazelles? Way too panicky to keep in an enclosure. Cheetahs? Turns out they won't breed in captivity. The bottom line is that out of 148 large mammal candidates on the entire planet, 134 of them had at least one of these fatal flaws. Eurasia just got lucky and had the handful that didn't. And it wasn't just the animals. It was the actual shape of the continents themselves. Think about it. Eurasia is wide. It stretches east to west. This means that crops and animals domesticated in one place, like the Fertile Crescent, could spread for thousands of miles across similar climates. It was like a superhighway. But now look at the Americas and Africa. They're long, stretching north to south. This creates huge climate barriers. A crop that works in Mexico just can't grow in the Andes. It wasn't a superhighway. It was a grueling obstacle course.
So you get the head start in farming. How does that turn into conquering the world? Well, it sets off this incredible chain reaction. A domino effect that would basically define the next 13,000 years of history.
And the chain reaction works just like this. First, farming creates surplus food, which lets people settle down. That leads to denser populations, more people. And when you have a ton of people and enough food to go around, not everyone has to be a farmer anymore. You get specialists, soldiers, inventors, priests, kings. And, maybe most importantly, living side by side with farm animals for thousands of years exposes you to their germs. Your population builds up immunities, but those germs become deadly epidemic diseases to anyone who hasn't been exposed. And just like that, you go from farming to having guns, germs, and steel.
So what happens when these two completely separate historical paths, one that had this massive head start and one that didn't, finally crash into each other?
To see what happens, we're going to the highlands of Peru in the year 1532. This is the moment when the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro meets the Inca emperor himself, Atahualpa. And this one event, it's like a perfect snapshot of the last 500 years of world history.
Pizarro shows up with a tiny band of men, just 168 soldiers. Think about that. They're exhausted, and they are thousands and thousands of miles from home.
And on the other side, they were facing an entire empire, led by a man considered to be a living god, with a gigantic army waiting for his command.
Atahualpa's army had 80,000 soldiers. The odds are they're completely mind-boggling. And yet, in just a couple of hours, the Spanish captured the emperor and slaughtered thousands of his men, all without losing a single one of their own. How on earth was this possible? Well, Pizarro had every advantage that Eurasian history had produced. He had guns and steel swords that cut through Incan armor. He had horses, which were like terrifying tanks to people who had never seen them before. He had writing, which meant the Spanish could share detailed strategies from previous conquests, like what Cortés did in Mexico. And the most powerful weapon of all, he had germs. A smallpox epidemic born from Eurasian livestock had already swept through the Americas, killing the previous Inca emperor and starting a brutal civil war. Pizarro didn't conquer an empire. He was just the final blow delivered by 13,000 years of Eurasian history.
So, what is the big takeaway here? After all this, how do we finally answer Yali's profound question?
The answer is this. The huge, sweeping inequalities of our world don't come from differences in people. They come from the differences in the continents themselves. The shape of the land, the wild plants and animals available to be domesticated, these were the factors that ultimately decided who got the guns, the germs, and the steel.
And you know, this whole framework doesn't just explain the past. It forces us to ask a really important question about today. In our super-connected, globalized world, how do these deep geographic roots still affect the wealth, power, and destiny of nations right now?